Hi everyone, this is Phil, the YouTube channel for Trapped in the Care System, 18 Years, My Story. This is now video 3 and we're on page 10. Let's commence the video. They were names which I can't describe purely to their identity. The people I moved in with, they ran the local village shop. Everyone knew them and they were the heart of the community. They had an Alsatian, which I cannot remember the name of to this day. They also had a son and a daughter. The son had moved out and I think the daughter was not always around, but she did live there temporarily while I lived there. There was a stream at the end of the garden and I used to ride my bike up and down with the dog chasing me on my bike. For some reason, this is now page 11, the dog was always trying to mouth my feet while pedaling my bike. I used to pretend that the dog was a lion and I was the lion tamer in the garage. And I used to chase that dog everywhere. I loved that dog so much, but I think I was too much for it at times, as I would never leave it alone. I can remember concreting the back garden near to the house to make a patio. I was so excited to be involved in a bit of fun child labour. I was in my element. I can also remember helping my foster father with doing the grocery deliveries around the neighbourhood on a Saturday and Sunday morning. I loved going out in his van. If I remember rightly, it was a Morris Minor van. My schooling was not just at school. Joyce, or Joy, do you know what? I've said the name, but I'm going to carry on because I know she's passed away. Taught me everything I could not do myself. She taught me how to tie my shoelaces, how to do my tie, how to tell the time, and she even helped me to do my homework and work things out for myself. Spelling, timetables, maths, she was a great teacher. At school, I was at the top of my class in so many subjects, and I owed this to Joyce, who had the time to work on me. My homework was always on time with Joyce's guidance. There was one time when I really did get told off. I'm going to actually say both their names because I know both of them passed away. By Derek and Joyce. I was not hit ever, but I can remember the psychological effect of upsetting someone who you really cared for can be just as upsetting, like I had upset them before in the past. I was in the doghouse, literally. After this, all I wanted to do was to make up for it, and especially not do it again. As a weekly treat, I had pocket money, but I was also allowed a couple of sweets of my choice from the shop. I didn't take a couple, I took maybe 4 or 5, which is twice as many as I thought I would get away with it. Well, I didn't, so at a later date, when I was told I could take a couple of sweets, I did, but I replaced them at a later date to compensate on the 2 extra sweets which I had taken, even though the sweets were taken off me. This made me feel like I had repaid them back by the shop being up by 2 sweets. Also, I can remember Derek and Joyce putting together a little toolbox for me so I could work on my new bike they had bought for me. Well, it wasn't new, it was second hand, but I didn't care because it was my first ever bike, which was mine and not anyone else's. I loved that bike. I started becoming a collector. All letters which were sent to me or Derek and Joyce, I would jump on the chance of saving the stamps before being thrown away. I started to go to the post office next door to buy Continental collectors. This is now page 12. Stamps from all over the world in collector's packs, which were properly formulated. Then I started collecting coins and football cigarette cards too. I love this new hobby of mine. With my new formed hobby, I gained my friend too, a new friend, who I found out also collected stamps, coins, cigarette cards and football stickers. Otherwise, anything which was collectible and was regularly available from the local shops. We used to do regular swaps with each other. When my mum used to visit, we would go to Maidstone for the day, as she did not want to stay in the house. My mum thought that Joyce was a bit over the top about things, but at the time she was going through a lot of heartache, which my mother never knew about, and I didn't either. Which is where Joyce's anxieties were coming from. The doctor's visits over a short period of time, I started seeing less and less of Joyce as she was spending more and more time in bed. Every time the doctor came around, I was asked to stay in my bed and not come out until the doctor had gone. I was starting to worry about what was going on. I thought that maybe I was making her ill because I was too demanding on Derek and Joyce for attention and affection. I was a needy, demanding, emotional little boy, and all I wanted was to be loved, while my foster mother was slipping away from me at the same time. This time was by far the most traumatic time of my whole life. By going forward, 10 years later, I went back to the village store, which was then a hairdresser's. My life, emotions, feelings all came back. I'm getting quite emotional about this. In 1982, when I left there, only to find out as age 18 years old, who had just come out of care and wanted to see Derek and Joyce, to be faced with even more sadness. I found out that Joyce had passed away with cancer. Shortly after, I had moved away, but I did not know this for 10 years and couldn't understand why I had not heard from them both. Now, I don't know how soon after she passed away with cancer, but I do know that she did pass away with cancer. And there was a time when I stopped hearing from them both, and I'm thinking that that's possibly the time when she passed away. This is when it makes me angry with social services losing my files, because it is like as if I didn't even exist. It also a breach of the Data Protection Act, and this is why I want everyone to know my story even more. Even though I am a very private person. It was a very sad day when I moved away from the warm and secure clutches of Derek and Joyce each morning to find out that I was going back to the Anna Wilson. Temporarily, as it was still closing down, with kids still living there. After a very brief period of time, I was found a foster home placement in Sittingbourne. So my stay at the Anna Wilson was very brief, and there were only a few kids I recognised, but it was being used as a stopping home until the kids found foster parents' homes. This is now page 13. So parents, rather than the kids living in a children's home, they were put into foster parents' homes instead. The day had come when I was on the move again to Sittingbourne, which was where my dad still lived, but on the other side of town. My new foster parents were, I cannot say their names, and 3 foster sisters and 1 foster brother. This did feel strange for me, as I was living in the same town as my dad, but was only allowed to see him once a month due to social services control and restrictions. This was also around the time when my mother had a mental breakdown. My father even went to the same Catholic church as my foster mother and my foster brother went to. I didn't ever go to any church throughout my childhood on my own efforts. I went because I had to, or I felt I should, so I would fit in. I realised if I had a chance, then I wouldn't go to church, as I never really felt the urge to, or any form of spirituality towards any form of church. At the beginning, my foster brother was a couple of years above me at school. One of my foster sisters was working in a cake shop. Another foster sister was a window dresser. Another foster sister was doing A-levels, and I was in the last year of primary school. Also, I had a rabbit called Sooty. Because the Anna Wilson was closing, I had the choice of adopting Sooty. I spent all my money on that rabbit. It would regularly sent me with kicking his back legs and spraying me with pee on me all over my body. Quite disgusting really, but he was my pet. I hate cleaning out his hutch, especially in the heat of the summer. My foster dad helped me make a run in the back garden by putting mesh around the base of an old climbing frame with a half-moon corrugated shelter in the run. That was his daytime shelter, and then back in the hutch for the evening, away from preying foxes. I used to skateboard a lot as a child, and skateboarded on the hill next to the house, past my old primary school. And at the time, while I was at the primary school too, I used to ride my bike around the block a lot too, with my portable radio strapped to the handlebars. I used to go to the college and play in their grounds a lot with my friends. Sometimes my friends weren't there and I would play on my own. If no one was around, I would play bat and ball against the wall on my own. I had a good group of friends in Sittingbourne. One good friend when I used to meet up with and walk into town on a Saturday morning. There were several other friends, but of course I cannot mention their names. They are the ones I can remember from 30. It says 36 years ago, but this is 37 and a half years ago because I wrote this a year and a half ago. There was also another group of friends I used to hang around with who used to live around the block from me. These friends were what made me living in Sittingbourne feel more like home to me. Having real friends at the time, but lost contact as I did move away again. This is now page 14. My home life with my foster family was sometimes very lonely, as I found it hard to talk about my emotional problems. As I say, I was only around 10 years old. Could have been a bit older. Could have been a bit younger. No, I was around 10 years old, I would say. But I felt the world was on my shoulders. My foster sister was with her boyfriend a lot. And my other foster sister also had a boyfriend. So they spent a lot of time together when they were away from the house. So most of the time I was with my foster brother, my foster mother, and my foster father. Myself and sometimes my foster sister, I can remember being at home too, helping her with making soft toys. I can remember having great times making soft toys with her in her room. My foster brother was out with his friends quite a lot, so I never really spent much time with him. When I was moved to Sittingbourne, I felt like I wasn't wanted to be around and I was in the way, especially with my foster brother. Unfortunately, I so much wanted him to accept me, but I felt like he didn't want me to be living with him, and I was in the way, and I annoyed him. I remember he was a bit of a bully towards me, but maybe I gave it back as well. I came back from secondary school shortly after I started the new school and found out that Sooty had made a bid for freedom. There was no longer a Sooty. He had found fresh pastures, probably munching on someone's allotment, eaten all their harvest. I didn't feel too bad after a few tears. It was the last connection with the animals in the home, which I had, and it was time to let go and now keep my pocket money in my pocket instead of spending money on food and straw and hay for Sooty. It did cost me to keep him. Hay, straw, rabbit food. It wasn't cheap. As a 10-year-old child with all the pocket money going on to his welfare, when all he wanted to be was free. I don't blame the bunny called Sooty. I played rugby on Sunday mornings too. There was one time the atmosphere in the house was awful when I saw two of my foster sisters, my foster mother and my foster brother. Actually, my foster father and all of the foster sisters actually in the house, and they were crying. It was so upsetting because I could see something bad had happened, but I didn't know until my foster mother said that the oldest foster sister I had, her boyfriend had been killed in a car accident. This was a very, very sad time. This really changed the atmosphere in the house to the sadness and unhappiness. After this had happened, I hardly saw my two of my foster sisters anymore. The other foster sister was away more, and my foster brother was out more. It was just a very sad time for all the family, and hardly anybody really hung around the house for that much at all. I do remember going to Salcombe in Devon with the family on 2 occasions. Could have been more, but I can remember 2 occasions. A beautiful part of the world. I used to go out on the Lilo and get sunburned regularly. I can also remember going camping near Sevenoaks a couple of times too. So I did have some memories with the family. I can remember my mother saying that the family were not friendly to her, and I remember rightly I was given the option to be adopted by the family, and I said no because I already had my own mum and dad, and I did not want to lose contact with them. I do remember roughly around the same time my dad and my half sister came around to see me, but I was told I could not see them as I was only allowed to see my dad once a month, and that was social services saying that, and I didn't want dad to get in trouble. And to this day my half sister questions why I wasn't able to see dad, because he would have been breaching the conditions of me being in foster parents and turning up unannounced and without due course for me to be allowed to see my dad more than once a month. Just before moving in with this family, I nearly ended up being fostered by another family in Raynham. I was put on a possible placement with them and had trial weekends with the family. They had a young son and daughter and 2 kittens, I remember. The little girl used to chase kittens around and they would escape up the curtain and out of reach of her. The father got a job in the end in social services and started training to become a social worker, then decided it would be too much for them to cope with me as well as him getting a new job, because at the time he was unemployed. I can remember my foster mother coming into my bedroom and telling me that she knew I was unhappy and that social services had found a place for me to move to. This happened soon after I said I didn't want to be adopted, but then deep down I was unhappy, and so I went around the neighbourhood to say my goodbyes to all of my local friends. In 1984 to 88, at the age of 11, just before my birthday, I got moved. I was on the move yet again to a place which still exists to this day, so I'm not going to say the name or the location. But this time I actually was really excited. They had animals, they had goats, chickens, ducks, donkeys and geese, all in the grounds, about 3 acres, with huge cascading Scots pines everywhere. The children's home was run privately by 3 individual couples. Members of staff were, cannot say their names, who didn't all work together at the same time, but at different periods of time during my stay at the home. Sorry if there not any inclusion of any names, but I'm not allowed to use any names. But if there were any other names, there's a few names which I've forgotten. Before I moved to the home, my mother had moved from Saltdean and moved up to, this place is now closed so I can mention the name. It was in Putney, but you know what, I'm not going to mention the name, but it was in London. Anyway, my mother and her boyfriend at the time had split up, and my mother was being harassed by him, so had to move. This was the end to my visits to the Saltine house. This was the end of an era for me. I had such happy memories. My mother was especially impressed by the hospitality of everyone at this new home. My mother said the house is run by really nice people. My mother often wrote thank you letters to the owners of the home for the hospitality, the food and the drink, which she had never received previously in her visits to the Anna Wilson home. This is going to be the end of video 3. This is page 16, and I'm going to put it to an end and wait for the next update. Take care, have a good day everyone, and please like and share. Thank you, bye.